What's up, guys? I'm live. I'm so sorry I'm late. I'm like 30 minutes late. One of my meetings just went over, and then school gets out like right around 2 p.m. And so I was like sitting in school traffic. So thank you for being here. I'm sorry I made you wait. I'm just gonna hang around for just a little while to let everyone join. And I'm going to start accessing the questions that you guys asked, because I think you guys already asked a lot of questions in advance, and if some things come up while I'm answering questions, I'll answer them, but there's a lot of questions that people have asked. So this is the first question. I have PCOS and ovulation prediction kit strips show positive for ovulation. Is it possible that I don't ovulate? Because remember that ovulation predictor kits just test for LH, a hormone called luteinizing hormone. And so you can have some luteinizing hormone spikes without ovulating. So it is kind of tricky to just use ovulation predictor kits. It's important to make sure you're still tracking your temperatures as well. Usually using temperatures and ovulation predictor kits are the best route to go. I work night shift 3 days a week. Any tips on weight loss or health while working nights? Oh, I'm sorry. So when you are working night shifts, it's completely contrary to your circadian rhythm. So your circadian rhythm is the fact that your body works in conjunction with nature. You're meant to be awake during the day and you're meant to sleep at night. That is how the body is set up. We're very in sync with nature. And so when you're going against that circadian rhythm, or you're doing an opposite circadian rhythm, it's very, very difficult. It's even more difficult if you're doing both combined. So on some days you're working night shifts, and on some days you're on the day shift. Your body never finds its normal. It doesn't know what's day and doesn't know what's night. It's very, very, very metabolically confusing and just body confusing in general. So the best thing you can do is make sure that when you are sleeping during the day, you're sleeping in a very, very, very dark room, pitch black. So do what it needs to take to be in a pitch black room. And then on the days that you are awake, you want to have as normal of a schedule as possible and get as much sun as possible. So your goal is to really regulate your circadian rhythm and keep that in mind. When it's nighttime, it needs to be completely dark. I mean, no screens, no lights, nothing. When it's daytime, should be light. You should spend time outside and that kind of thing. That's like the biggest thing, but usually I just encourage my girls, especially if they're struggling with hormonal imbalances, to just please, please, please try to do anything you can to get off that night shift. Because sleep is really important, you guys. Your circadian rhythm really regulates your hormonal rhythm. Should someone with PCOS have their Mirena IUD removed? I can't tell you if that's the right answer or not. That is only your decision and your decision alone. I think it's up to you to understand what is being inserted into your body and how it affects your body, how it affects your cycle, turns it off, how it affects your hormonal structure, but the choice is up to you. There's no black or white to these situations. Women need to figure out the best birth control that works for them personally. But then on the other hand, you need to make sure that you're not sacrificing the health of your body in return. So there's no judgment there. There's no right answer. It's more just what works right for you. But I have a whole story highlight on IUDs specifically and explaining exactly what hormones are in them and how they affect the body. Suspect Candida or UTI. Woke to pain in my lower right abdominal pelvis and back. Recommendations? I would definitely recommend looking into that, like going and getting a test for a UTI, because you want to make sure it's not a kidney infection. So remember that UTIs, if they go untreated, they can turn into kidney infections, and then that can be like pain in the low back. So that sounds like something pretty serious, and I would really make sure to get that checked out. Make sure you let the doctor know what supplements you're taking and that kind of thing, because something could be affecting you. If testing for low iron, what are the first whys that should come to mind? Recommendations? Honestly, I don't think that people should be I guess you could test for iron, but like, what are you going to do when you find low iron? I don't think that supplementing iron is safe at all. It feeds pathogens, it feeds parasites, it feeds it's not, that's like supplementing a different mineral, like gold or copper. Like it just because they're low, your levels are low, doesn't mean you need to supplement to replace it. Why are you depleted? Usually when you're depleted of iron, you have very low stomach acid, you're not digesting your foods well, the iron from your foods well, which is a bigger problem than just iron. But when we just supplement iron, we continue to impede digestive function and make it even worse, so that we're not even absorbing our iron anyways, and it just becomes this vicious cycle. So whenever you're low in a vitamin like vitamin D or iron, you need to ask yourself why you're low, rather than just supplement to replace it, because not all supplements. Sorry, my Wi-Fi went out. Okay, next question. What iodine do you prefer for the Bulletproof Sinus Cleanse? I just use like Lugol's iodine, or there's one called, oh my gosh, what is it called? I'm completely spacing. I usually use Lugol's though, and oh, it's Detoxidine. That's what it was. It's Detoxidine, and you can find Detoxidine on Amazon, but I usually use Lugol's for the Bulletproof Sinus Rinse. Okay, and that's for cleansing the sinuses of yeast and biofilms. Why after getting out of binge eating, the body doesn't lose weight? Because when you're binging, your body, on the periods in between a binge, your body's starving, right? It thinks there's a famine. It thinks that it doesn't know when the next time it's going to get food is, or enough food, because it feels like you're in a famine. You're not consuming enough food. There's a food shortage. And so wouldn't it make sense for your body, when you actually go back to eating a normal amount of food, to hold on to everything possible? Because you've communicated to your body that it is not safe to burn any fat, because why would your body burn fat when it thinks a famine is coming? So at that point, your job right there is to not focus on the weight, but to instead focus on why your body might not be losing the weight, and to just focus on keeping your body safe, because that's most likely why your body can't lose the weight right away. It has to find its new normal, and its new normal needs to be that you're safe, you're fed, you're given what you need, you're not restricted. And once your body catches on to that, it usually takes about 3 months, you do begin to start to see weight loss after resuming normal eating. I hope that makes sense. If you guys have any questions, please ask, but please speak about fat intake, grams, needs for women's hormones. I don't think that women need to be eating as many fats as they are. Like, I just mean the percentage. I do recommend a high calorie intake to women, between 2,000 and 3,000 calories. And so, you know, if you're getting 20% of your fat from or 20% of your calories from fat, on that type of diet, you're still getting around 100 grams of fat or more. So like, that looks like a lot of fat, but that's really only coming from 20%. That's only 20% of your diet. So I usually recommend about 20-ish%. Some women need more, but most women don't need as much as they're consuming. I prefer women to be able to utilize carbohydrates and burn on glucose, since the cells prefer to burn glucose, and it's a less metabolically dirty process. You know, so that's why, like, I believe that higher carbs and lower fats can tend to be a good combination. But again, I'm not meaning like low fat. Like, in conjunction, you know, 20% of your calories coming from fat for a 2,000 calorie diet is still quite a bit of fat. So I'm not a low fat person by any means, but I'm definitely not like a high fat promoter any longer. I mean, remember guys, I used to be a keto nutritionist. I am no longer. There's a reason for that. I saw just women like they were getting better in certain ways, but then over time they didn't feel their best, and there is a reason. But if you guys want like maybe a summary of metabolic nutrition, there is a book called How to Heal Your Metabolism by Kate Deering. I really love that book because it's like simple, easy to understand, and she talks about like how to actually regain metabolic stability. And I'll be, you know, pretty much teaching that in Fully Nourished. That's exactly what Fully Nourished is going to walk you through, the blueprint of healing your metabolism, so that instead of having to cater to a broken metabolism that's burning free fatty acids, you can restore your body's ability to burn glucose and have a more efficient metabolism. Because at the end of the day, you guys, the cells prefer glucose. It's just science. It's called the Krebs cycle. You probably learned about that in chemistry, but like, you know, sometimes we weren't paying attention then. Best tips for late period that is not typical, definitely not pregnant. Remember, you guys, that a late period is not a late period. It's a late ovulation. So you ovulated late, or you haven't ovulated at all. And that is why I always recommend tracking your ovulation, because as a woman who knows exactly when she's ovulating, you know exactly if your ovulation came late, and you know to expect a late period. If you know that your period comes 14 days after your ovulation and you ovulated 6 days later in this cycle, it's most likely that your period's gonna come late. So a late period is usually not a late period, it's a late ovulation. And why did you miss ovulation? Were you super stressed out? Were you under eating? Were you drinking a lot during that time? You know, you gotta go back and say like, why was I not ovulating, and what's the stressor? So what are some healthier carbohydrates? Yeah, guys, so I always say ripe in season fruits. Depending on what season you're in, you want to always eat ripe fruits. So right now there's lots of summer fruits, so carbs from fruits are incredible. They're very rich in fructose, which is actually quite healing, and people don't really focus on that because it's like all of a sudden like fructose became picked on. But like, if you actually take a step back, you can look at the science, and like fructose is actually very therapeutic. They actually used to inject type 2 diabetics with high amounts of fructose to heal their diabetes. That was like in the 50s and 60s. So fructose to me is one of most women's favorite carbs, and they run very well on lots of fruit. And then on the other side, there's root vegetables that have their main source of sugar is starch. So there's starches in there. They tend to feed gut bacteria a little bit more than fruits do, because sugar and fructose gets absorbed pretty quickly by the stomach, and fruits break down quite quickly. And then, you know, when you're doing fruit juices, there's absolutely no fiber, so nothing to break down. Starches take a little bit longer to get through the digestive tract, and they do feed bacteria. And so sometimes, like if people don't tolerate carbs very well, it could be helpful to not eat too many starches for a little while. But the starches from root vegetables tend to be the best, and then last and my least favorite are going to be like the starches from grains and beans, and even nuts have some starches. The whole mama, I know you said the reason. I don't know. Are you referring to your question that you had asked? If you have Candida, do you think fruit should stay in the diet? Yes, I do. I do not think you should cut sugar when you have Candida, because it becomes vicious, you guys. Anti-Candida diets are stupid. Stupid. They're created by people that are trying to make money from you. And when you starve your Candida, it does not die. It just grows into other tissues. It goes into the bloodstream, and it gets into the sinuses, the vagina, and that is why you have chronic sinus infections and really bad allergies and constant yeast infections. You didn't get rid of the problem, you allowed the problem to proliferate by not keeping the Candida fed and localized in the gut while you killed it. So, you know, it's one of those things where a healthy body and a healthy metabolism gets rid of bacteria in the gut. When your body is stressed out or suppressed, you're gonna have a hard time fighting Candida. You need to build the body's defenses and allow the body to take care of yourself, because I promise you, you're not that important, and you're not going to be able to kill Candida yourself. You're just not that powerful. We have to sometimes realize that our body is sometimes a little bit more smarter than us. And so we have to say, okay, I don't know everything. My body's really going to be very smart in this, and I'm going to support my body's ability to fight off an infection. I got to get myself to the best health possible. And when you cut carbohydrates, what happens? Your immune system goes low, your metabolism goes low, and everything slows down. Because remember, when carbohydrates were restricted from our ancestors, it was winter time. The days were shorter. Summer was over, and the only access to carbohydrates, they didn't have any more honey, they didn't have any more fruit because it wasn't summer anymore, and so the only access was like small amounts of root vegetables. And so what happened, to conserve energy, the body took in the environment, said, okay, we're getting less carbs, okay, we're getting less sunlight, okay, we're gonna slow everything down so that we don't burn through energy as quickly. So when we cut carbs, we're in a hibernation state. Remember that. That is what the body did to survive during winter. It is a slower metabolic rate. So if you're trying to fight Candida, that's the opposite of what you should do. You want to metabolize sugars better so you can be able to get your immune system. So there is a very healthy balance when you're healing Candida and eating carbohydrates. How to get off your hormonal birth control or IUD? Is there a way to do it best? It's really good to prep your body about 2 to 3 months before and then not go off just like in a very stressful time in your life. You want to kind of prepare. You want to make sure you're eating really well. You want to make sure you're sleeping really well. You're taking care of your body, that kind of thing. Thank you for what you do, Jessica. You're so good for me and my health. Haha. Oh, you guys are so sweet. I really just, I'm just passionate about one thing, just getting this information to you. I was where you were at one point, and I had to learn all of this on my own, spending thousands and thousands of hours on research and just looking into my own body and experimenting. I've spent tens of thousands of dollars. And so it's like, I just now have all this information inside of me, and it's like, wow, I can't even stop it. Any special brand of Triphala you recommend, and how long is it safe to use it? I like Organic India Triphala, and I don't see a problem. I usually recommend never taking herbs longer than 6 months. You should always take a break from almost all supplements. Once a month, I think you should give your body a week rest. But like, I would probably stay on it no longer than 6 months for Triphala. It's a pretty gentle herb, though, in all honesty. Hi, Jessica. One quick question, please. Is it safe and good for my healing gut to eat reheated, cooked? I know you had a potato or rice. Thank you. So it's just kind of going to be dependent. When you're healing your gut, you always want to make sure like the brands of things are removed. Like, you don't want harsh, like raw vegetables or lots of nuts and seeds. Like, anything that seems like it's going to be harsh or hard for your body to digest probably is. So usually a little bit of potatoes and rice is good to start tying in to see if you tolerate it well. If you begin to experience constipation, your symptoms are returning, like those things, you might not be able to handle starches just yet. And so then you're going to have to just keep them out for a little while and then try again. So that's kind of what I recommend. Like, I recommend, all foods should be experimented with like every couple of weeks when you're on a healing diet to see like, okay, can I tie things in? The only things that I save for last are raw, above ground vegetables, leafy green, anything raw, fiber, and then nuts and seeds, and then like bran, like grains that have the bran on them, like brown rice, quinoa, things like that. Those are pretty harsh. And then beans. I save all those for like 3 to 6 months after I got healing protocol, just because they're like so just like on the gut. They do, they're the hardest to digest and break down because of all the plant chemicals in them. But something like an easy starch, like a peeled potato or white rice, usually tends to be okay. Sorry, I'm just like having like some technical difficulties. Okay. The whole PUFA is terrible thing got me effed up since the Japanese eat tons of fish and seaweed. Yeah, and the Japanese are actually the highest rates of colon cancer and lung cancer in the world. Isn't that super interesting? So a lot of people love to throw the China study out, but it's like, you guys have to understand that like all these studies being done on like Asian people being so healthy are very biased. A lot of the studies that have been done are going in with so think about it. Like, if scientists go in with the goal of finding out if so-and-so diet is healthful for you, they're going to find that that's the case. They're being paid to do so by a company that wants them to do so. There's actually rumors that like the fish oil companies actually funded the China study or not the China study, but the studies that were going into do research on, a high fish, high carb diet. But remember also, like, a lot of people throw the China study out, which is like completely like they're using it to like support veganism or vegetarianism, but it's actually come out that almost every single person in the China study wasn't eating a vegetarian or vegan diet. They were all consuming some meat and some fish. So it's completely like null and void. So, whenever it comes to like, you got to look at research, like you want to make sure that, usually research studies are biased in some way. They're trying to prove something for some industry. And unfortunately, that's how science has gone. And so it's like, you have to make sure that you're not just like, somebody just didn't like look at a study and say, okay, it works for me. Like, it works for what I'm trying to sell, or it works for my ideas about things. So it's so important that like, you don't let somebody else's one glance at a research study hurt your body. I hope that makes sense. Hello guys, thanks for joining. What do you think of DIMM for estrogen? It's well known that I am not a fan of DIMM for a lot of reasons. It's very powerful, and I've seen it actually do a lot more harm than good in most women. So what actually got me thinking about DIMM is that I saw a lot of women who came to me with like really bad hair loss that we could not solve. Like, their hair was just falling out, falling out, falling out. And a lot of women like started coming to me and they're like, I'm estrogen detoxing, like I'm doing all the things. Somebody told me a DIMM, and like, you know, like all these people like telling me. And so they're taking DIMM because like that's what they're supposed to do for estrogen detox, and their hair's falling out, they're getting like pretty bad acne, and they're feeling crazy, like their moods are just very unstable. Because you guys have to remember that DIMM is an aromatase inhibitor, meaning that it kind of prevents estrogen from being turned into something else, or the opposite. It prevents testosterone sometimes from turning into estrogen. And so sometimes the body tries to change a hormone into a different hormone for a reason. And when we start to mess with that process, we can actually cause more harm than good. And so a lot of women experience hair loss, the feelings of going crazy, and acne when they start taking DIMM. So if you've ever felt that way and you couldn't pinpoint what it is, you can thank the DIMM. There are other ways to detoxify your liver, and to me, it's just not probably worth it. And it doesn't, like, a lot of people are like, I'm taking DIMM, so I'm detoxing my liver. And I'm like, I'm sorry, that's just one of many things that need to happen for that. So I think lay the foundation first, make sure the liver's getting enough sugar, protein, saturated fats, and then you can start experimenting with the herbs. Could matcha be beneficial for PCOS if you have anxiety? Some say it's a calming caffeine. I'm not a fan of drinking matcha every day as a swap for coffee, because matcha is very rich in fluoride. Fluoride is naturally thyroid suppressive, and if you're drinking something with fluoride every single day that's very concentrated in fluoride just naturally, you can still suppress thyroid function. So all these people with PCOS that are like recommending you just chug like gallons and gallons of green tea because it's anti-androgenic, I'm like, please stop it. You know, like if you want some matcha a couple times a week, like make yourself a matcha latte, go for it. Like I do that too, but I'm not gonna like chug it in place of coffee. And if coffee gives you guys anxiety, you guys, are you starving yourself? Coffee only gives you anxiety because it's a metabolic enhancer. And if you don't have enough fuel in your liver and you are not feeding yourself enough, when your metabolism is enhanced, it's like pushing the gas without any fuel in the tank. So what happens? Your body has to make fuel. And how does it make fuel? Well, cortisol and stress hormones are responsible for one thing: break down your tissues to be sent to the liver to be turned into glucose to keep blood glucose stable and the cells fed. And so the way you take care of not getting anxiety after you drink coffee is very, very simple, you guys. For 4 weeks straight, eat every 2 hours on the dot. Set your phone timer. Get your blood sugar balanced. And then when you go back to drinking coffee, make sure it's organic and make sure it's consumed after a meal. And I promise you that will most likely take care of your coffee problem forever. Okay, sorry. I get a little bit intense about coffee because like I really love coffee, and it's also actually pretty like liver beneficial, and like there's all these people that are saying like it impairs this certain enzyme and like this and that, and like ugh, like okay, but it's so rich in niacinamide and it's so pro-thyroid that if you can tolerate it, I'm all for coffee. What do you think of black cohosh, vitex, and maca for low estrogen? I never think you should tie in 3 herbs at once. I always recommend like 1 at a time, slowly. Black cohosh should only be taken very, very, very conservatively, because anything that's going to be an estrogen booster, you have to understand that sometimes low estrogen doesn't always mean low estrogen. And you're like, wait, what? So when you have low progesterone or high amounts of stress, the body's not detoxifying properly, estrogen can get stored in the tissues. Because remember, you guys, your bloodstream is a highway for hormones. It's not like where hormones are stored. And so if you don't get estrogen tested at the right time of the month and don't take into account your other hormonal structures, sometimes your estrogen isn't low. It can even sometimes be high, but it's stored in the tissues. It's not mobilizing well. It's not detoxifying well. And so here you go, trying to boost your estrogen levels, and you immediately start to get estrogen dominant symptoms: fibrocystic breasts, sore, painful breasts, heavy, painful periods that are clotty, headaches, anxiety, depression. You start to get all these weird estrogen-like symptoms before a period, and you're wondering what the heck's going on. Why? What is going on that could be causing estrogen dominant symptoms if I have low estrogen? This is usually why. So I always be very careful with things like that. And then when it comes to maca, it always needs to be cooked, you guys. Traditional preparation was always fermented and boiled and should never be consumed raw. It is a very goitrogenic substance, meaning it's a cruciferous vegetable that is very anti-thyroid. So make sure when you're doing maca, it's always gelatinized maca. And then Vitex can be very helpful too. I do recommend taking a 5-day break from it once a month though. I have actually a story on that. Possible causes for rosacea-like acne around the mouth and upper cheeks on the face. Usually it is like look into fungal rashes. If it's rosacea like acne, it could be inflammation, it could be metabolic issues, it could be thyroid issues. I have to actually see it to get an idea. I can usually tell pretty closely if something's like more fungal related acne or bacterial related acne, or more of like a inflammation and like metabolism hormonal type acne. Like just from my years of experience, I'm able to kind of like look at it and just see it. But I would say that like anything that is like small pustules or is like red and angry is usually like inflammatory, whereas something that is like more cystic more like bumpy or rough or oily or dry, but or seepy or itchy, that's going to be more like fungal or bacterial. So I'm not really sure. It could be a lot of things, but sometimes it's liver detoxification, sometimes it's gut issues, inflammation, thyroid issues. I mean, it just could be so many different things. Thoughts about gluten? I noticed you have gluten-free food on your stories. Yeah, I think that gluten is horrible for everybody. It's a trypsin inhibitor. It pretty much wrecks your digestion, and so does a million other things on this planet, like EMFs, Wi-Fi, you know, constant daily stressors. We breathe in pollution all the time. We have no business eating gluten, you guys. We have access to all gluten-free foods now. Like, why the heck you're still eating gluten? It's just gonna wreck you. So the only time I ever recommend like eating anything with gluten in it is if it's traditionally fermented sourdough. And that means that all the gluten has been broken down by that sour starter. But yeah, I think gluten's the devil, honestly. If we're being honest here. I just don't see it helping anybody. Like, I can't like it. What is your intake on getting a missing period back due to high insulin levels? Yeah, insulin doesn't mean anything, you guys. Like, people are like, okay, so this is like the biggest misconception, is that insulin is the only thing responsible for blood glucose levels. Whereas there are so many hormones that play a role. Cortisol, growth hormone, glucagon, adrenaline, prolactin, TSH, all can actually determine your blood glucose levels. So we've kind of blamed insulin for something that has a multitude of factors. Insulin is not a bad hormone. Insulin allows glucose into the cells. I don't think that high insulin is necessarily a problem unless it's very, very high. I think that insulin can be out of balance for a lot of reasons. The main reason being that salt intake is very, very low. Remember, one of insulin's main jobs is actually to rise and retain sodium. when salt is low, because the body needs to kind of maintain sodium levels. Another reason insulin can be high is because the body needs fuel, and it needs it so freaking fast because your body's under incredible amounts of stress due to external stressors, not eating enough, or inflammation stemming from the gut. And so remember that if your insulin levels are high, it means that the body is trying to get glucose into the cells as quickly as possible, because all insulin does is open up the cells and allow glucose in. But did you gain weight a little bit with your insulin levels high? Because insulin being high can cause a little bit of weight gain, but it can help the body feel safe because it's getting some fuel into those cells. As long as you're intaking the right amount of fuel, it can be okay. So it's very interesting. Like, I think that sometimes lab ranges don't take into account the person. If you feel better with higher insulin levels, maybe your body has compensated in some way and thinks that you do need higher insulin levels for a reason. Why do we feel the need to have to interfere with the body's compensation methods to protect you? You know what I mean? So, I always trust the wisdom of the body over a lab test. And if a lab test says it's irregular and you feel better and you're getting your period back, I'm like, flick those lab tests away, burn them. Like, I don't give a frick. You know what I mean? Like, you matter more than your labs matter. And just because someone has decided that this is the range that is healthy for you doesn't necessarily mean that your body is going to be that way. So it's great that you got your period back. That's amazing. You should be so proud of yourself. That shows your really hard work. Sorry, I keep hitting the wrong one. I'm having like major technicals. You guys should be amazed that I even figured out how to do this like question answer thing. Like, I didn't realize I should have been doing this longer, Okay, so I'm going to ask a question that came in live, and then I'll answer this one by Harley Girl. Do you know much about causes of chronic hives? They're itchy, but are hives a fungal bacteria thing? Hives are usually a histamine thing. So if your body's not detoxifying properly, or your bacteria is not breaking down, or you're not making enough of an enzyme called DAO enzyme, then you can actually not be breaking down histamines very well. And so histamines usually are the cause of hives. Grass-fed kidney taken a couple times a week can be really helpful for hives. Is it okay to take inositol and metformin at the same time? I don't see a problem with it as long as your blood sugar is not dropping too low and stressing your body out. Because they can sometimes both have like a blood sugar lowering effect, and so obviously you don't want yourself going hypoglycemic either, because that's a whole nother issue. Chronic upper back pain started when I went off the pill a year and a half ago. Two-part. I'm going to go to the next part. And I have low progesterone and low cortisol. Could my back pain be related? Second part, yeah, of course. So could your low progesterone and low cortisol be related to back pain? Absolutely, girl. Are you kidding me? So remember, what is the effect? When someone has low cortisol, you have to assume that you had high cortisol at one time. And I think I've talked to you about this before during a live, is that when you have low, it means that your body was probably pumping out a lot of cortisol for a certain period of time, usually a while, sometimes years. And that is a sign that, remember, that cortisol is one of its main functions is actually to break down muscle tissue. And so a lot of times it starts in the legs, because remember, the legs are the biggest muscles in the body. Like, that's why like bodybuilder dudes have like really big upper bodies and then they're like stick legs, because they're like eating through all their leg muscles. It's so funny to me. But that's what happens when you're under stress. But if you already didn't really have a lot of body fat or muscle, then you can actually start to eat through other muscles. And why don't we think that like a back pain could be the cause to really lack of muscle, and just honestly like lack of being able to, like your spine does rely on a strong core and strong back. And if your body's like literally eating through your muscles, I know it sounds kind of scary, but of course there could be back pain. Another thing that can really cause like upper back and shoulder pain that's chronic is something as simple as low potassium. So sometimes people are really low in like certain minerals like magnesium and potassium and sodium, and it almost leads to like a Charlie horse type like pain somewhere in their body. Like, some people get it in their heart a lot, like that chest pain. But it can happen in your back for sure. And that can happen with muscle twitching as well. So it absolutely could. Remember, when you're healing your like I don't want to say your adrenals, but healing your stress hormones, or your hormones, getting your stress hormones down. Remember that your body's burning through minerals very quickly. Sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, those are minerals that you need to be really active about consuming regularly when you're trying to heal that. Your body probably has higher needs. And so I'd be interested to see if just that alone, like getting some minerals into your diet, would be helpful. And then sometimes also sugar. So when you're trying to heal your stress response and you have low progesterone, it can be really helpful to get some sugar into your diet regularly. Like I recommend maybe having like 4 to 6 ounces of orange juice or pineapple juice at your meals. With protein, carb, and fat, like we're not gonna go crazy with your blood sugar. I didn't say a lot, I said a little, but it's easy to digest and absorb sugar that can be completely utilized as fuel when eaten in conjunction with protein and fat. But those are kind of like some places I would start. Should we use sunscreen? Remember you guys that sunscreen, although skin protective, also draws UV rays to it. So it's very important that if you do use sunscreen, you reapply very regularly, because you're actually attracting more UV rays to your skin. So just an alert on that. I don't think there's anything wrong with using like a mineral-based sunscreen, but I think that everyone should get 30 minutes of sun exposure per day without sunscreen and then go apply sunscreen. Obviously, if you're gonna like go to the pool all day, you want to be protecting your skin, but like, you know, do what people used to do in the olden days too, like sit under an umbrella, like put a hat on. Like I only use sunscreen when I must, and I always use a natural like zinc-based sunscreen. Thank you. I don't think I'm allergic to foods. I just get hives no matter what. Yeah, I mean, that could totally be still like a histamine issue. Jolene. Oh, Jolene, hi. So like sometimes I get followers that I know, like I've known in my past, and I love it. Like it's so good to see you here, Jolene. Best advice for someone who has been diagnosed with adrenal fatigue. I just want to feel good. Yeah, so if you've been diagnosed with adrenal fatigue, like just first admit to yourself that adrenal fatigue doesn't exist. And that's actually very helpful, because I think a lot of times people get it diagnosed with something called adrenal fatigue, and there's like this really obscure syndrome that, and they don't really know what to do about it. And so it can be like really overwhelming. Whereas if you just understand that your body has been under stress for a very long time and needs to be restored from the ground up, I think that's a little bit easier. And so my first advice with someone with adrenal fatigue or HPA axis dysfunction, just meaning that your brain's taking in so many environmental stressors, whether that's internal or external, and acting upon them, right? You need to make sure your brain understands it's safe. And so the first 2 things that I use is food, nutrition, because that's something so easy that you have access to, that you can really use to use food as information and communicate to your body that it's very safe and fed and loved. And so I recommend with somebody who has been diagnosed, the minute that they wake up, within that hour, that is when your first meal comes into your trap. And every 2 hours on the dot after that, you are consuming a small little balanced meal of protein, carb, and fat. And you're doing that all the way through the day until right before you go to bed. And you're doing it all again the next day. And if you do that consistently for 4 to 6 weeks, you will see huge changes. I promise you. I promise. That's one of the most effective ways to really get the body safe and fed and really cared for, and understanding that it's completely safe and it can start to really restore itself. Another thing is salt. You need high amounts of salt. Like, think about how much salt you think you need and triple it. Triple it, because you need so much salt. Your body needs to feel like it doesn't have to work hard to retain minerals. And so Himalayan pink salt, Celtic sea salt, all day, every day, more than you think you need. Like I always say, I want your foods just to the point where it's like almost too salty. And then sleep, girl. Just sleep. So pretty much eat, sleep, don't work out too much, just chillaxy, and sleep as much as your body needs. Try to schedule in sleep on the weekends. Try to maybe schedule 1 day per week where you sleep in. You're probably going to need more sleep than most, like 9 to 10 hours, maybe more, and just do that. Eat every 2 hours on the dot like it's your full-time job. If you're going to exercise, be very, very relaxed with that. Walk, yoga, Pilates, just enjoy yourself, and then salt, and sleep. That is like how you really heal the stress response, you guys. Does having your period regularly mean you ovulate regularly? It usually does, but there are women who don't ovulate and still have a period because of estrogen. Remember that if you have enough estrogen in the body, the uterine lining will still thicken up, but it's not a true bleed because there was no egg dropped. And remember, the uterine lining is being prepared for a potential pregnancy that would occur, and progesterone's job is to actually thin the uterine lining. So it's more likely that you have an ovulatory period if your period is like lasting a really long time, like 7+ days, really thick, clotty, crampy, heavy. That sometimes does indicate like an anovulatory bleed, but sometimes it could just mean that you have lots of estrogen and not a lot of progesterone to balance it out. So usually you are ovulating, especially if you're having like a really regular period, but it is still good to track your cycles and understand that when you're ovulating, you know, first you want to know when you're ovulating, and you guys want to keep track of how long that luteal phase lasts. That luteal phase is between, you know, when you ovulate, your egg drops, and then that emptied egg sac becomes something called the corpus luteum. And the corpus luteum is a hormone gland that creates you progesterone. And remember that corpus luteum, if you did fertilize that egg, would go on to become the placenta and create you progesterone all pregnancy long. But in the meantime, when you're not pregnant, it's still supposed to make you progesterone for about 11 to 14 days. Let's say you're ovulating on day 22 of your cycle and you are starting your period on day 28. That means your luteal phase is only lasting 6 days. It's very unlikely that you're making enough progesterone in that case. So that's why I always say, you guys just track your cycles. It's not that hard to roll over in bed, put your thermometer in, take your temperature, type it in an app really quick. I mean, come on, modern conveniences. Praise Jesus, but it's not that hard. So I think that's really important. And then you'll be able to, in 2 cycles, to see if you're actually ovulating or not. And you don't have to ask, you know, you'll just know. So I think it's really powerful to know when you guys are ovulating. It's very empowering. Is salmon a great protein choice? No. Remember that like excessive salmon consumption is what puts bears into hibernation. Like that's what's going on. So I recommend, like, I don't mean like salmon's bad, but don't like load up on salmon every day. Eat it when it sounds good, and do other fish, whitefish, shellfish, that kind of thing. But don't like just load up on the salmon, please. It can be metabolically suppressive in high amounts. Coming off progesterone, had natural periods, skipped 1 month, now having very light, weak spotting. The blood is different colors, lost 20 pounds, and have been sick, not exercising. What's your opinion? Yeah, that's hard. I don't really know. How long did you take the progesterone? That's my question. Did you take it properly, cyclically, like day 14 to 28 of your cycle? Those are 2 questions that I would ask, because I'm not really sure what's going on, but that would help me. Can chastetree berry cause acne? Yes, it can. Absolutely, because it can boost estrogen levels as well as progesterone. How to lower blood pressure? Eat more salt and eat more potassium. Orange juice mixed with baking soda every day can be really helpful. Get your sodium and potassium levels up quite quickly. Any tips for healing Candida while also sealing your leaky gut? Yeah, I mean, you can't really seal your leaky gut with Candida. Remember that, like, the reason most people have leaky gut is because Candida has literally put its finger-like projections through the cell walls and, like, ripped them apart. So I would really focus on killing Candida first. You can consume really, like, gut-healing foods like raw butter, grass-fed butter, ghee, raw dairy, things like that, like super ripe fruits. Stay away from really fibrous foods, but I wouldn't really like focus on healing leaky gut until you've gotten rid of Candida. Is a low resting heart rate something to be concerned about around the low 50s? Yeah, that's pretty low. You know, like there was this like rumor kind of saying that came out a while back that was like the lower the heart rate, the better. But I'm like, there's a fine line. So that is something that I would definitely kind of pay attention to. Does it raise throughout the day? Are you an athlete? Like some people that are athletes or like a little bit more athletic or work out a lot can have lower resting heart rates. But if it's pretty low and doesn't really raise, and if you have other hormonal issues, it can sometimes be a signal that like there's been some chronic stress. But again, like you should always use temps and pulse in conjunction with your symptoms. Like, I don't care what your temps and pulse are if you feel great. It's like, I do want them to like be optimal, but at the same time, like, you don't want to obsess over the numbers if you're feeling okay. But yeah, that is kind of low. I wonder if you're like tired or don't feel like alive completely. Diagnosed with PSC, primary sclerosing cholangitis, going hand in hand with long-term IBD. Any thoughts on handling PSC? I've never heard of it. I, like, contrary to what you guys think, I don't know everything. And I've never heard of that. I'll have to Google it, and I'll have to like understand what the condition is to really see like what could maybe be causing that and driving that. If you've had long-term IBD, like, remember you guys, IBS is caused by SIBO always, and it's almost always caused by too much serotonin, not enough dopamine, and too much estrogen that's not being detoxified out of the small intestine. That's all like IBS is, whether it's IBD or IBC. It can really mess up with the motility, your digestive motility. So I'm wondering what PSC is. You've got me curious. I gotta go look it up. Missed your lives from last week. Would love to watch them. Are you still going to be putting them on your YouTube? Yes, I'm sorry. I've just been behind. I've just been really behind on uploading them, but I'm going to. Thank you for kicking me in the butt. I will do it tonight. I have been dieting, cutting off dairy and gluten, and exercising for a while, but I have not only achieved to lose 6 pounds in 2 months. Yeah, so you guys, like, it's one of those things where cutting calories doesn't always equal weight loss. It can sometimes equal weight hang on, meaning like you might lose a little weight, but you're actually losing less weight than you would if you just got your metabolism working efficiently. So, make sure that you're eating balanced amounts of protein, carb, and fat. You're eating 100 grams of protein per day, no questions asked. And then if you're eating a lot of inflammatory foods, like a lot of people tell me they go gluten-free or dairy-free, but then they replace their dairy products with just really like sugary or chemically rich products that just cause more inflammation. Or they say they're eating gluten-free, but they replace the gluten with really, really junky gluten-free foods. So remember, you guys, those processed seed oils, anything with canola, soybean, safflower, sunflower, those oils are going to make you process glucose very, very poorly and gain weight like a mofo. So, or like hang on to weight and it's gonna feel like a fight. So make sure when you're going gluten and dairy free, that's not the whole story. If you're going gluten and dairy free, what are you replacing that with? What are you replacing that dairy with? All those nutrients, vitamin A, calcium that help you burn fat. Where are those nutrients gonna be coming from in your diet? Because it's very difficult to find them without getting in high quality dairy. So, you know, I'm just kind of saying that dieting and going gluten and dairy free mean nothing to me if you're not doing it the proper way, meaning that you're eating balanced meals, protein, carb, and fat, you're eating every 2 to 3 hours, smaller meals, and you are actually eating anti-inflammatory foods. I don't care if they have gluten or dairy, I care if they're anti-inflammatory. How do you know if you have too much estrogen in the small intestine? How do you rid it? Does DIMM work? No. Estrogen it can really wreak havoc on like your digestion. You'll bloat, it can give you like really bad PMS, gallbladder issues, pain in that right side. You don't have to I don't want to make a problem out of something that doesn't exist. Usually you have too much estrogen when you have estrogen dominant symptoms, or you have IBS or IBD or Crohn's or something like that. So, if you don't have digestive problems, then it's not that big of a deal. But a lot of digestive problems are caused by like too much serotonin and too much estrogen. So DIMM does not work for that. DIMM does not just detox. There's like so many practitioners that are just like, they're trying to sell their freaking products to you guys, and it bothers me so bad. But DIMM does help detox estrogen, you guys, but it's just one small component of the big estrogen picture. And eating a raw carrot daily is way more effective for detoxing estrogens from the body. Just a raw carrot daily, yeah, that simple. What are the cons of taking an allergy pill every day? I'm allergic to dogs. It just really depends on what allergy pill you're taking. If you're taking like the second generation of antihistamines like Zyrtec and stuff, they're not good for you. But you can go back to the first generation, like cyproheptadine. Cyproheptadine is an okay allergy medication to take every day, and it can actually really help with like histamine issues in the gut. And Benadryl can be like okay. Like I wouldn't say like take it every day like nonstop, but I would choose that over something like Zyrtec or something like that. What do you think of bulletproof coffee? I'm fine with it, but I don't care at all if it's like has fat in it. You still have to eat a grown-ass adult's meal before that. So like if you want to have your coffee filled with butter, or we can just call butter what it is, cream, then you have to still eat beforehand. The same rule applies. If you're like the biggest problem or mistake that women make is intermittent fasting and doing bulletproof coffee, or drinking their bulletproof coffee on an empty stomach. You need protein, carb, and fat in the morning, you guys, if you're trying to heal your hormone issues. And drinking coffee on an empty stomach just really can mess with and imbalance your hormones. So always drink coffee with a meal or after a meal. But if you want to put butter and have it like floating on the top of your coffee instead of cream, go right ahead. Go right ahead. I'm just like picking on people because I just think it's funny that like people will only eat like butter, but they won't eat cream, even though they're like the same thing. Is eating smoked canned oysters the same as getting them fresh nutrient-wise? Not quite the same, but obviously like the convenience factor can be really helpful, and like some people don't like to like consume oysters raw, so it's best to like get everything as fresh as possible, but sometimes smoked can be a little bit more convenient. How long does post-pill acne typically last? It should only last around 3 to 6 months. If it's lasting longer than that, it's probably a lingering issue probably caused by the pill, or that was present before the pill and the pill just made it worse. So usually like 3 to 6 months it will start to like subside and die down, but if it doesn't, then there might be another issue at hand. Any tips for Hashimoto's healing? So when you look at Hashimoto's, you guys, like you never want to ask like Hashimoto's healing. It's more like what caused it in the first place. I do not believe like Hashimoto's is being considered an autoimmune disease, but just because you have antibodies against something doesn't mean you're actively attacking it. It can mean that something is very, very inflamed. And so if, in my opinion, if the thyroid is very, very inflamed, there's chronic inflammation in the thyroid, what needs to happen? Well, I need to focus on removing all the foods in my diet that are anti-thyroid. What's anti-thyroid? Estrogen, so you need to eliminate pesticides from your diet, and then you also need to eliminate chlorine and fluoride, which are very anti-thyroid, so that's going to be, you need to filter your water. And then you also need to make sure you're not consuming polyunsaturated fats. They're so bad for your thyroid. Get the fish oil out, get the like all the canola oil and the soybean oil, and then sometimes nuts and seeds can be harsh on the thyroid as well. And then even sometimes goitrogens, so like removing some above ground vegetables, like not doing a lot of raw leafy greens or like raw cabbage or broccoli or anything like that, like just getting a little bit of leafy greens and making sure they're always well cooked. And sometimes that is enough to see like huge improvements in your thyroid numbers. So I usually like work my clients up to that over a period of time. It's not like, you know, all at once. I like to first change their diet because it depends on where they're starting at. And then we kind of like get the protein, carb, and fat thing down. Then we eliminate a lot of the like raw above ground vegetables, and we just make sure they're eating like really easy to digest like roots and fruits. And then like making sure they're getting enough protein, because remember, protein is necessary for thyroid healing. And then removing those anti-thyroid foods. My grandson just had pain and they found he had a block in the intestine and was prescribed Miralax. What can my daughter do to prevent this? Thank you. Is he like being shamed for pooping? Like a lot of times parents unknowingly shame their children for, or praise their children for something that should be a natural bodily function, and this can cause chronic constipation in children. Whether you praise them for pooping or you say like, ew, that's a stinky, you know, you're really, that they're a human too and they feel ashamed. And so if they are feeling that that's something to be ashamed about, why would they let it happen naturally? And so a lot of that's usually the main cause of chronic constipation in children. And then if that's not happening and you're just letting it happen, you're acting like it's a non-issue, you're changing the diaper with not complaining, not shaming them, like they need to make sure. And then if that happened and they're already out of diapers and now they're in underwear, then this is a different story. It's probably an issue that's already been. And then like look at his diet. What is he eating? Is he eating junk food all the time? Is he eating crap? Of course he's going to be constipated. So like there's definitely a lot of factors. The first step is kind of like acting. How are you acting around poop? A lot of times kids aren't pooping because they just feel ashamed to poop. They feel like it's a bad thing. They feel like it's something weird, and their parents have never really sat down and like told them like it's okay, it's just a natural thing, like you poop, I poop, we all poop, you know, like it's not something scary, because to a child it's scary to have something coming out of, like, this is like a little graphic, but like coming out of your body. Like, how does a child understand that, see that? They might think that's something scary. And then if you're reinforcing that into their ideas, like saying like that's bad, or like you're naughty, or you know, you did a stinky, or like saying yay you know, like they feel like it's a performance, like oh my gosh, this time it was good and last time it wasn't, like oh no, like it just becomes like they're stressed about it. So that's like the biggest thing with constipation. And then sometimes just putting like a little aloe vera in their juice can help keep them regular. Just a tiny though, like not a lot, or it'll give them diarrhea. What can ringing or beeping in the ears mean? A lot of times it's a vitamin B2 or B1 deficiency. Sometimes that's enough to get rid of tinnitus. Hi from the Netherlands. It's 1:30 a.m. and I should be asleep. My teeth are starting to get a little transparent. What does it mean, and can it be reversed? You know, that could be a demineralization. Are you consuming enough calcium, magnesium, zinc, iron? You know, there's iodine. There's a lot of minerals that are important for growing teeth. And the fat soluble vitamins, are you getting enough vitamins A, D, E, and K? Those are all important for building teeth and building bones. So we got to make sure that that's happening. I thought fish oil was a good supplement. It can be in some cases, like especially if people are struggling with acute issues like really bad cramping. It can block prostaglandin production, but I don't really think that fish oil is like, it's touted as like such this amazing supplement, but at the end of the day, like if you actually look at it, it's still a little bit inflammatory. So, and it's very hard, like I said, I've changed my views a little bit on fish oil because it's very hard to source where it's not oxidized or rancid by the time you get it. And so even if it was good in theory, once you get that bottle in your hands, it's most likely no longer in its whole true form. It's oxidized, it's rancid, it's kind of broken down. And so it's not going to be as beneficial as it touts that it's going to be. I hope that makes sense. But there's a million reasons why. Do you work with people remotely? Yeah, I do work with people remotely. I only work with people remotely. So yes, I do work with people over Skype and over the phone, and that's how I do most of my practice. Can you please explain why body shape can change on bioidentical progesterone? Yeah, because progesterone is the hormone that's going to prepare. So when women start ovulating, then they start their periods, right? So your first ovulation is what brings on your first period, 2 weeks later. And so when you start ovulating, you start creating progesterone. And so as you go through puberty, you'll start to see your hips get wider. Your body's preparing for childbirth. Your breasts grow. Your body's preparing to be able to carry a child, birth a child, and feed a child. Not to say that that's your purpose, but it is your biological purpose. And so progesterone is going to be what's mainly responsible for instilling this process. And so when women go through a long period of time without making progesterone, I mean, I've had some women that have literally never ovulated regularly in their life, and it's been they're like 29, and so they still have kind of, I don't want to say a prepubescent body, but they haven't, their hips have not really quite developed, or they've been on birth control for a long time, and so that is not quite developed. And so you'll start to see shifts. Maybe your breasts will get bigger or smaller. You might lose a little weight in your stomach, but your hips might get bigger. So it just kind of depends. But like I said, progesterone does affect fat distribution, because fat distribution is just your body thinking fuel for later. And like in the hips and thighs, that's a lot like preparing for, a lot of times when you're making breast milk, a lot of that fuel comes from the hips and the thighs. So it just really kind of depends, but it can also kind of mess with your blood sugar levels. So when you start supplementing progesterone, you need to eat more food, and you need to make sure that you're eating enough protein, because it really does eat through protein quickly, like your body's burning protein. And so it's like super important to make sure that you're eating enough while you're taking progesterone, or you can actually gain weight because your body's kind of nervous and feeling stressed out. I salt my food a lot and still don't taste it that much. Can I salt it too much? No. Whenever you don't have a taste for salt or you need more salt, it's usually meaning like you're deficient in salt. That is usually the case, because when your body's at enough, things almost taste kind of too salty. Like you're like, that's a little too much. So Instagram's cutting me off, guys, right now. So I'm gonna stop right now. I'll post this and then I'll go live again and I'll continue to answer questions, okay? So just join me again if you want to stay live with me.